Story 1. I completed 2 tours in Afghanistan, and let me tell you that arbitrary force movements based on political whims are exactly what we do not need right now. Story 2. Brit here. Okay, let's say he does, and now US troops are in Hungary. When an order comes to move into Ukraine, will they do it? When an order comes to support Russia, will they do it? That's my worry. Story 3. There is much to unpack here. There is no strategic or operational benefit that comes from this. Whether it is trolling or a real threat, it must be treated as a real threat. None of these decisions being made from a defense or foreign policy standpoint do any good for the American people or our true allies. Not one positive outcome occurs. The fact that more noise or real action isn't being taken by Americans and Europeans is telling. I can only hope that whatever stunned inaction we are currently witnessing fades in favor of a real response. 80 years of peaceful coexistence and partnership thrown out the window? Those who voted for this decision may not understand the consequences, but anyone with a sense of reality knows this is wrong on every level. Story 4. This president is broken. I would like to exchange it for a new one. Joking aside, I really dislike this situation. I'm tired of living in challenging times. Story 5. Trump wants to invade Hungary? Or is he deploying troops to assist his ally Vladimir because Hungary is compatible with Russia? Story 6. In real terms, it is a threat implying he would use United States forces against Ukraine and potentially Europe in support of Russia. Although America is quite radicalized, I do not believe Trump has the political capital to join Russia in a war against Europe. It is likely just a bullying tactic and should be ignored while calling the bluff. This seems more like a move characteristic of Putin than Trump, raising questions about the level of coordination between the two. Story 7. Looking rather like the next phase of Putin's military operation to me, although I would not have thought a year ago that United States troops would be at the forefront. Story 8. I think Trump believes he is in the boardroom at Trump Tower and not the White House. He thinks he is being clever by adopting highly contradictory and aggressive positions to close a particular deal, not realizing that diplomatic reputation matters in statesmanship. He is utterly undermining the United States every time he throws his weight around. Story 9. As a civilian who has visited both countries extensively, Germany has far better infrastructure and quality of life. If I were in the military, I would dislike this idea. Life outside of the larger cities in Hungary is quite challenging. Story 10. It is not a coincidence that Russian bots spread misinformation against Kamala Harris and Democratic voters during the election. The Federal Bureau of Investigation warned us. Story 11. Enemies are mobilizing before our eyes. Why do we try so hard to explain it away with imaginary best-case scenarios? Story 12. I feel betrayed and extremely frustrated. This cannot be what the American people want. We are friends. We defend and help each other against evil, which is evident here. I cannot understand how the American people fell victim to this populist figure. How can one vote for such a despicable and repulsive person, a fraud, a criminal? How can almost everyone in the Republican Party submit to him like sheep? Is there no decency anymore? No character? Not even a small amount of bravery? I refuse to believe that Americans are like this. I am Dutch and not part of the US forces. I just needed to express my feelings. Story 13. So, Trump is moving troops to support Hungary, which is pro-Russia. Is anyone considering that he or Russia could be preparing to launch further attacks into Europe? Story 14. The United States becoming a puppet of Russia is an outrageous situation, resembling a poorly designed mod for a strategy game. Story 15. I am personally tired of presidents saying they want to focus on the United States and then doing everything they can to involve us in wars. Story 16. In the best-case scenario, I can't see this happening quickly. You have status of forces agreements that would need ratification from the host nation, which are significant matters. You would then need bases and infrastructure built in Hungary, and only then could you start discussing the permanent movement of troops. Personally, I can't see it taking less than a decade. They have been talking about moving forces from Okinawa to Guam and northern Okinawa for at least that long with little progress, and both of those moves are smaller and less diplomatically challenging. Story 17. Given the method of disinformation and fostering cult behavior, could it also reduce the chance of the troops in Germany switching sides? Story 18. As a female veteran who served 8 years in the Air Force, this is absurd. Moving troops to Hungary would strain our already stretched resources and potentially damage relationships with our North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies. I was stationed in Europe and understand the delicate diplomatic balance there. Story 19. Trump is a genius, so I am sure he has thoroughly considered the strategic value of moving United States troops to Hungary. Trump is a savvy businessman who makes calculated and sound choices based on common sense. Moving thousands of troops into Hungary from Germany is a significant financial decision. He will likely make Hungary pay for it, just as he made Mexico pay for the wall he constructed across the border. Seriously, it does not matter where Trump sends United States troops. Trump is hostile towards America's historical allies, and Europe will never see America as trustworthy. The damage to the alliance is immense. The United States is only part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in name. The United States is no longer part of the rules-based order. The United States is no longer the leader of the free world. Story 20. They know that the tundra is melting, and I think that's why he is so focused on speeding up global warming, annexing Canada and Greenland, and forging an alliance with Russia. Whoever controls the tundra will have vast amounts of untapped, pristine, undeveloped wilderness full of natural resources, fresh water, and very few local populations to manage. Story 21. This move aims to help Orbán win the next election and weaken Europe, which also explains his actions regarding Ukraine. Story 22. Fascists will unite. It makes sense that those who pander to Putin will want to come together in a mutual support group. Story 23. I have about a year and a half left. I was working on plans to separate in Germany and stay here. This complicates things. Story 24. As a young two-striper, Hungarian girls are attractive. As a senior non-commissioned officer, we are going to have to work around the clock to move all of this, and we will likely lose half of it. As a retired veteran, is there a hot Hungarian girls video on YouTube? As a taxpayer, have you lost your minds? Never mind the expense. Orbán is similar to Putin. We might as well move to Moscow. Story 25. My view is that Trump is not a general, an admiral, a strategist, or anything remotely military. That's not a problem. Most presidents are not five-star generals. But they listen to five-star generals. They understand that moving thousands of troops, machinery, and supplies is not a decision we take lightly. Setting up troops anywhere is a significant political move as well as expensive logistically. However, Trump seems to see this as very simple. He appears to treat it like a game, unaware of the real material and geopolitical costs of his actions. He strikes me as an overgrown child given the reins of a very powerful nation. So I'm unsurprised but also just tired. Trump likely would genuinely make such decisions because, to him, the cost or implications do not matter. He wants to act out of frustration for not getting what he wanted, engaging with dictators and strongmen who only value force. He seems to see this as a winning political move, but I personally do not believe the United States and our military are as valuable as he claims. Do not misunderstand me. I'm not saying we have a small footprint, but we have forgotten why we are so large. We made deals and treaties committing us to these responsibilities as we sought to be the world's police. We are in your backyards. When Trump starts moving troops around because he dislikes the terms, I think he is foolish. He does not think before he acts and says whatever comes to mind, behaving like a privileged individual accustomed to being praised for his ignorance and expecting others to clean up his mess. Who will clean up his mess this time? To prevent any comments on this topic, yes, we can change the terms of deals, but I do not believe we have good reason to do so. I think it is absurd to impose ourselves onto the world stage, establish a foothold in as many countries as possible to project our power globally, and then become angry and throw a tantrum when we face the obligations and responsibilities that come with it. We can criticize the terms without using our influence every time we feel slightly insulted. Sometimes we act as bullies and do not like being called out for it. Story 26. It seems like America is taking another step into the wrong side of history and against countries that have been allies for years. Story 27. It has no teeth. Germany is one of our largest overseas bases and the largest in the European Union. It would take a significant amount of money and time to do it correctly. Story 28. Hungary generally supports Donald Trump. This support is to be expected. Story 29. Ignoring the political issues for a moment, it makes no sense logistically. The infrastructure at bases in Germany is significant. Ramstein Air Base alone is the size of a small city. Hungary does not have the building capacity to come close to what German bases can offer. It would take billions of dollars and years to reach any operational point. Additionally, transporting people and supplies would be nearly impossible without a large hub like the German bases. Story 30. Right-wing supporters back one another. I manage our contracts for a private company and collaborate with the state law enforcement division as well. Everyone is scrambling to secure resources. Money is being distributed in unprecedented ways due to fear and temporarily lifted restrictions. This is a significant disaster caused by a foreign agent influencing high levels of a corrupt ruling class. Story 31. Hungary is one of the countries that voted with Russia against a United Nations measure that condemned Russia and supported Ukraine's territorial integrity. The United States also voted the same way. There is no doubt that this position favors Russia. Every action taken by Trump should be analyzed for how it benefits Russia. Story 32. It's a petty insult to the European Union that is welcome, to be honest. United States troops moving further east is acceptable. The German army can have the bases instead. Honestly, I do not see this as a win for Trump. Story 33. Trump wants to align us with other authoritarian leaders because he is a deeply corrupt and insecure individual. He will destroy the country to make himself a dictator. Story 34. Just another gift for his friend Putin. President will continue alienating all allies that the United States has, and then he will find himself in a major conflict in the Middle East and call for assistance. At that point, Putin will refuse to help and will reveal that he compromised him for years. All adversaries understand that this is his final term, and they will wait for the United States to be at its weakest point to strike. Story 35. Nobody can trust anything he says. It is likely just a distraction. It may not be. We have to wait it out. Story 36. I would love to see a documentary about the Trump administration, filmed like Arrested Development, complete with Ron Howard as the voiceover. Story 37. Why doesn't he move to Kursk Oblast to help the North Koreans fight Ukraine? I think his master Putin will appreciate it. Story 38. The real question that should be asked is what route United States planes would have to take to reach Hungary if the European Union closes its airspace for the United States military. Story 39. Setting the stage to open a second front, the United States and Hungary are advancing on Ukraine through Romania and Moldova. Story 40. It won't be long until Trump stations troops in Russia so that they can invoke whatever Article 5 they create to fight Europe alongside the Russians. What a situation. You all chose it, enjoy. Story 41. Right now, his administration is working hard to turn America into a one-party state. The illusion of elections persists. This is their intention. They held the Conservative Political Action Conference in Budapest for a reason. Democracy is at risk. Story 42. Trump discusses Dogecoin and its potential for saving money. However, relocating 35,000 military personnel along with all the equipment from Germany to Hungary would incur significant expenses. Story 43. It is not feasible to move so many personnel arbitrarily to a different country, which is not prepared to receive them in such a short period of time. This would create a logical and bureaucratic nightmare and will require months, if not years, of planning and coordination between the United States administration, military, the administrative body of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the national and local governments of both Germany and Hungary, and likely other NATO member states. On top of that, they will need to establish numerous new agreements. They would also have to revise military strategies and logistics plans while coordinating all the changes with their partners. Story 44. I hope this is just another empty threat or ignorant outburst he won't follow through with, just like 70% of the statements he makes, although the 30% he does follow through with is always horrible. If true, this will just be a continuation of his goal of critically weakening America and ending Pax Americana through his gutting of the Department of Defense, stabbing our allies in the back, kissing the ring of our adversaries, abandoning our partners and agreements, and now possibly this. The American people should not make the mistake of thinking Trump broadcasts strength or forces the world to respect America. He does the opposite. He broadcasts pathetic weakness and has caused damage to our reputation that will almost certainly be irreparable. I mourned for my country. Story 45. Ramstein base is vital for the United States Armed Forces projecting power to the Middle East. If they actually leave, it will be a significant setback. Story 46. It appears that Putin seeks to use proxy troops in Hungary to facilitate their movement into Ukraine from that direction. Trump aims for the United States to fulfill that role as a proxy. Story 47. I don't think the average civilian understands the amount of logistics, resources, and money it would cost to move bases from Germany to Hungary. It would take much longer than the time Donald Trump was in office. Critical thinking is important. Story 48. I have always wondered what would happen if we moved a division, such as the 101st, into Kiev about a week before Putin was set to invade. Would that have stopped him? Was he ready to start World War III? If that was an option, it almost seems like we were using Ukrainian lives to weaken Russia as pawns. Story 49. We would be arming Russia. There is some excuse to withdraw the troops and leave the equipment to Hungary, but they are turning the equipment over to Putin. Story 50. European dynamics often involve division and conflict within the European Union, and it may be effective to some extent. However, it seems unwise, as they could have leveraged their presence in Germany to create discord, though they might still do so. Hungary will now face significant pressure, and it's conceivable that this situation could become dangerous for the EU. On the other hand, it might accelerate necessary reforms, which could prove beneficial in the long run, marking yet another potential miscalculation by those aligned with Trump. It is concerning to have many personnel from a Russian ally positioned close to Ukraine and within the EU. If they enter the conflict on the Russian side or support a coup against Orban, the situation could escalate rapidly, with both scenarios being plausible. I sincerely hope that those in influential positions in Europe recognize that the United States has turned into a rival and adversary. Yes, there is a possibility that military personnel would comply with extreme orders, and there is no clear red line at which Americans would resist or revolt. If a revolt does occur, it is likely to be the right that replaces Trump with someone potentially worse. Story 51. For numerous reasons, this is completely absurd. However, the last time I checked a map, Hungary was closer to Russia than Germany. Story 52. Similar to his commitment to tariffs and Marco Rubio, neither have pictures of him in compromising situations. Story 53. Hungary is fully aligned with Putin and borderline hostile to the European Union. It makes perfect sense that Trump could align with Hungary instead of the European Union. Story 54. I'm feeling numb to everything right now. It's not even funny. Being treated as a pawn in politics has been exhausting. The whirlwind of changes over the last month has only added to the fatigue. At this point, I'm just trying not to be overwhelmed by the exhaustion. One part of me desperately wants to choose ignorance for the sake of peace, while the other part insists on staying informed. I know this doesn't really answer your question, but that's all I have. Story 55. I pray and hope all of you in the United States Armed Forces remember your oath to the Constitution. Your countrymen and women, regardless of political party or religion, need your protection at all times. Story 56. Order all American soldiers on European soil to leave in 3 days. Seize all American equipment. 2 can play that game. Story 57. No military affiliation, but this question is significant in trying to piece together what Trump may be up to. The purpose of Project 2025 is to use Viktor Orban's playbook for creating an illiberal democracy in Hungary and apply it to the United States. Only a few countries in Europe support Russia: Belarus, which has always remained a Russian satellite, and Hungary and Slovakia, which were more free but aren't anymore. Moving U.S. troops to Hungary would effectively shift a crucial troop presence out of the West and into what is hostile territory for democracy. This would allow Hungary, which has very limited power, to suddenly become a home base for American troops that could be used against other European countries. Additionally, if the United States were to leave the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, how could it maintain its military presence in Europe? Not from Germany. Let's say Europe decides to continue backing Ukraine for several years, as seems to be happening. This is contrary to what Trump wants, so moving US troops to Hungary or, more conveniently, threatening to do so, could push its former European allies into line. I refer to them as former allies because it appears that the United States now considers the following countries to be its key partners: Hungary, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, among others. Ultimately, this is not beneficial for the American people as a whole. It may be good for oligarchs and kleptocrats who seek to expand their power and wealth in any way possible. Any foreign countries that support Trump and the interests he represents while limiting democracy are deemed allies. This is why countries that maintain strong democracies aren't treated like partners. Trump is steering the United States towards an autocracy, with tech oligarchs at the helm. Story 58. I spent 3 years in Germany with the Air Force. They had well-established infrastructure and mostly good relationships with the local community. It took many years for that to develop. Aside from the fact that Hungary has authoritarian tendencies, why would US troops move there? Is the government following orders from Moscow again? Story 59. I'm not part of the United States forces, but for those who are unaware, Hungary shares a land border with Western Ukraine. The implication is that you will be entering the war as an ally of Russia. Story 60. If United States forces are in Hungary when Russia, with North Korean troops, enters into military conflict with democratic European states, then there is little chance of those United States troops becoming embroiled in or choosing to take part in the fighting. This means that the United States will still have a strategic position and support assets in that region, which it may need in relation to China, but there is no chance of them being in harm's way or feeling it necessary to protect their host nation when the European Union comes into direct conflict with Russia. If such a conflict arises, Hungary will act as a poisonous friend, remaining uninvolved or even supporting Russia in the conflict. The United States will support the narrative that Russia was left with no other choice but to defend itself through such action because of the aggressive actions of Poland and Germany. This assumes Hungary re-elects its current leader, so one can be certain that Russia will make efforts toward that outcome, including election interference and influence operations to maintain its allies within the European Union and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There may even be a coup supported or financed by Russia, with Orban as their collaborator. Story 61. Keep in mind that Viktor Orban is close friends with Donald Trump and his supporters. Fox News conducted a full week of broadcasts and interviews with Orban and Tucker Carlson. He has been invited to speak at the Conservative Political Action Conference and other conservative groups in the United States annually for the past few years. Last year, when the United Nations General Assembly took place and European Union leaders met at the White House for a dinner, Orban chose to go to Mar-a-Lago instead. He has visited Mar-a-Lago multiple times while Trump was not president in the past 4 years. This is an extremely dangerous development. Story 62. Forces in Germany are not just living in tents next to a motor vehicle and near an airport or railway station. They have been there for decades with significant infrastructure. They cannot simply load up a car and drive down the road. Story 63. Not an American, but I have a feeling I know who is going to profit from building all the necessary infrastructure for this. Story 64. Hungary and Russia are major allies. Trump's support for Hungary further indicates that he will side with Russia over any other country. It's quite concerning. Story 65. He is trying to persuade all parties involved in the Ukraine crisis to come to the negotiating table. He convinced Ukraine to return to the table, but Russia surprised him with fresh bombings. Now he is attempting to intimidate Russia by threatening to move US forces even closer to Russia. Story 66. I think Trump should go there to get the lay of the land, preferably in a spot with a school book depository nearby. Story 67. I believe we should remove all troops from Europe. My reasoning is that Russia, both financially and militarily, is in a weakened state. We have a few years before they pose a serious non-nuclear threat, so by withdrawing troops, we eliminate the last leverage they have over us. Story 68. The Republican Party has shown admiration for Viktor Orban, an authoritarian leader, for years. They even held one of their annual conventions in Hungary. Story 69. Military leaders swore an oath to the Constitution, not the president. It makes me sick to think of how many of our military personnel might not be aware of that. Story 70. It's not difficult to understand. Redeploying back to the United States is expensive, especially while the mineral deal is still a possibility. They need to keep the troops in Europe. Realistically, all current European Union politicians, except for Viktor Orban, seemed to celebrate when Trump was shot, so I am not surprised he is unwilling to cooperate with them. It is, of course, political, but it is also personal. Trump is redefining alliances to suit himself, and Germany, along with most of the European Union, does not align with his interests. Personally, I don't care too much, but if Trump values Hungary this much, I wish he would remove the tariffs. That would be an actual improvement for the average person. I could not care less if we have United States military here or not. Story 71. It is not a threat. It is a strategic plan that will occur sooner rather than later. It positions United States troops to potentially invade Ukraine or, in a worse scenario, assist Vladimir Putin in taking Austria and Poland. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.